Right, good day, Junior Techies. My name's Mr. P. I'm going to be going through this question with you. We're going to be looking at an exam practice question for the respiratory system. This is question 5 in your worksheet. So if you have the worksheet, fantastic. If you've tried this question, great. And we can go through this video to see how you've done. If not, make sure you get a hold of that worksheet, try those questions, and then tune into the videos so that we can work through them together and you can learn how to analyze the types of questions you're going to receive in your exam, and then know exactly what those questions are asking you to do to get maximum credit in your exams. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at a typical question that comes up many times, and here you can see a diagram that represents a model to demonstrate the breathing mechanism. And when we refer to mechanism, we refer to inhalation and exhalation. So we've got a diagram A and a diagram B. And there are two things that are changing here, or there are two identifiable differences that we can see in this drawing straight away. One relates to the balloons that you see in the inside of the bell jar, and the other one relates to the arrow pointing up and down. And now that's representative of something. And if we do a quick analysis of this diagram, and that's the one that I've just circled over there, we're going to be looking at moving between diagram A and diagram B, and that's the mechanism that they're referring to, because it's demonstrating a mechanism of breathing. Okay, right. Here we can see we've got the balloons inflated and the diaphragm pulled down. So we already know that the arrow, in other words, what has been labeled as D, is representative of the diaphragm. I'm not looking at the questions. I'm looking particularly now at getting context from my image that I'm given, from this investigation that I'm given. I need to get as much context as possible before I look at the question, because it could throw me off if I look at the questions first. So here we can see the balloons are being inflated and the diaphragm is being pulled down in diagram B. If we look at diagram A, the balloons are deflated and the diaphragm is moving back into an upward position or a flat position. Now, if we look at what each of these processes represent, I've got the inhalation in diagram B and the exhalation taking place in diagram A. Okay, and this is the breathing mechanism once again. Now, when we look at the questions, it's going to make a lot more sense. What do each of the following parts represent in the human breathing system? So they're referring here to parts A, B, and C. And if we go up to our diagram, we look at part A, this is going to be the trachea. So this is the main breathing pipe that moves from the nasal cavity and the mouth all the way down before it branches off into the right and the left bronchus. So here we're definitely looking at the trachea, and that's the most correct answer here for label A. If we look at B, B is referring to the branches. So this is the first branch off from the trachea, and this would be into the right and the left lung. Because if we look at diagram A, we're looking at the labeling of the left bronchus. And if we look at diagram B, it's actually the right bronchus. So we can write down the bronchi, or we can say right and the left bronchus. Okay, keep that in mind, because sometimes when you look at a question and you only have one image that is being labeled, and they're referring to a label B, and it refers to, or it points specifically to the bronchus, but the one on the right or the left, as part of your answer, you need to identify the side of the body as well. So in the case of diagram A, label B is referring to the left bronchus. In diagram B, we're looking at label B referring to the right bronchus. Okay, right, let's look at label C, pointing to the balloons, and the balloons are going to be representative of the lungs. And again, we're looking at the right and the left lung. In diagram A, it's the left lung. In diagram B, it's the right lung. All right, so these are the easy questions, 1 mark each, looking at what each of those labels are being representative of. And if we had to include label D, here we're referring to the diagram as we put down in the context as well. Right, now 5.2. Here's another explain question, and I love these questions because they actually test us to a different level of understanding. Now, explain refers to, or is the action word that requires of us to identify the what and the why of the question. And it says explain one way in which part A in humans is adapted for its function. Now, what was part A again? if you can recall, part A was the trachea. So if we are explaining one way in which part A is adapted for its functions, the one way that jumps out straight away should be the fact that we have the cartilaginous rings that make up the trachea. So those cartilaginous rings are definitely going to be what we need to identify in our answer here. Right, so we would start that off by saying that we have the C-shaped cartilaginous rings as part of the trachea, and what they do is function to open up and protect that airway for breathing. So that's very, very important. So that's our 2 marks over there. Question 5.3. Which diagram A or B represents inhalation? And if we've worked out our context well enough, this should be really, really easy for us. So inhalation, we're looking at diagram B. Question 5.4, give 2 visible reasons from the diagrams to support your answer in 5.3. Well, we did that in our context too. We look at 1, that we've got the lungs that are inflated. So in other words, the balloons that are inflated that show inhalation, and then the diaphragm that has been pulled down. Question 5.5, describe the mechanism of inhalation in humans for 5 marks. So this is a big, big question, and we need to make sure that our answer is all encompassing. So the mechanism of inhalation involves the diaphragm contracting and flattening. This external intercostal muscles contracting and pulls up and out. All right, and if we look at the rib cage moving up and out and the diaphragm contracting and pulling down, we're going to have the air pressure decreasing inside of the lungs because the volume of that thoracic cavity is increasing, and because that volume is increasing, the only thing that can take up the space that is being created is air. So air is then sucked into the lungs from the atmosphere because the atmospheric pressure is greater than the pressure in the lungs. All right, and that is the last question, 5.5. Well, these questions are previously asked in an examination situation, so I do hope that going through this with me today has helped you analyze these questions to know exactly what it is that they're asking for. Be very, very mindful of questions that ask you for visible reasons or visible differences, because that means you actually have to go to the diagram to see the evidence, to identify the evidence that motivates the answer that you have given. Right, Junior Techies, thanks for joining me. Get a hold of the worksheet and the worksheet memorandum and theory booklet just to help you prepare a little bit better. Try those questions, tune in for these videos, and together we can do well at the end of the year. Thanks again for joining.